Suffer as One is the debut full-length album from Living Gate. This is a Belgium and United States-based death metal band, and we could go as far as to consider some of their work technical death metal. They kind of go a little bit further with technique on this record, and it is inspired by old school death metal. That is their intent, but you can feel that there's some suffocation in there. There's some other things, but this comes from kind of an unlikely group of folks who are mostly based from the atmospheric black metal band Waigadude, and the guitarist from Amun Ra, and the drummer from Oathbreaker, and the bassist actually comes from Yob, which is pretty far from Belgium in terms of distance, but they all turned out to be a pretty good fit for this record because they're all pretty good at what they do, and again, the level of technique matches pretty closely. The big thing here is that Levi Seynaev is a fantastic guitarist. He's a great death metal guitarist, and it's brilliant the level of riffing that he comes up with on this record. I'd liken a lot of the sound of this record and the way that he puts together grooves as akin to Souls to Deny era Suffocation, and maybe a band like Incision, where there's certainly brutal death metal there. There's a little bit of Morbid Angel there. The focus on insistent grooves and the way that they translate with the drum patternation doesn't really link up to early 2000s brutal death metal, but the actual riffs do. So it makes for a very intense sound. It's one that we heard on their Deathlust EP back in 2020, and that sound is extended and perfected a little bit for this full length. So we'll get an example of what they sound like here for a clip, and then I'll talk more about how this record plays out. So while I do mention Suffocation as a point of intensity, as like kind of the old school anchor of this band, there is kind of an early progressive death metal touch to it. And so that means if you're a fan of like Disciples of Power and the way that they extend certain levels of scale and they play with riffs in terms of pacing, and there's just more of a wandering groove to their movement, I think that really fits the description of this band, because while there is intensity and brutality and some moshable nature to it, there are extended phrases that they bring into these riffs that are not necessarily challenging, but they're certainly thrilling to listen to at such a pace. And the only thing that really comes close to that in terms of my own reference is probably the second album from Anata when they had signed to Earache. There's a classicism to it. There's some Morbid Angel in there, but there's also some technique there that's a little bit more playful. It's almost catchy on a level in the way that they present it. So none of this is sloppy, none of this is slow, and all of it is indicative of a kind of modern death metal touch, but also a very classic sound inspiring it. So it almost feels like a technical death metal record when you sit with it, because it is precise, it is intense, and they really go for it on this record. My only kind of caveat to this is that they take a while to cut the intensity and find any real divergence from that point. And that means when they do slow down, they kind of dumb it down just a little bit. There's some moshable stuff there. There's some kind of what I would consider late 90s level of movement. They don't quite go fully brutal, but they insert some finesse into their moshable parts. And so we get variations on a theme for the most part. We don't necessarily get a fully infused dynamic other than that intense sound. So if you love their EP back in 2000 and you want more of that, really, that is kind of what we get here on this record. And I think that if you're a fan of everything from like Tomb Molds, maybe Planetary Clairvoyance and the intensity of that record, Inoculation, more of a brutal band with a science fiction theme, there's some of that feeling is here on this record where the intensity is there. There's that Suffocation influence in the riffs. There's also their own kind of thing that they're bringing to this, which is pretty entertaining. So we're not getting a fully dynamic brand new thing, but we are getting a very unique take. It's a very professional, very fast developed, and you can feel the enthusiasm behind this record as you're listening to it. You can see all the work they put into it, and for me, it was pretty exciting to sit with. I think this is a well above average band, a fantastic debut. They've done everything they can to stand out, and so if you're looking for something that is just new from a new perspective, that that is fully professional and just sounds great and will certainly hook into your ear and catch on pretty quick, this is a fantastic option. I really sat with this record a lot longer than I thought I would, and I was impressed by it. There's certainly things they could do to just make it a little bit cooler from my point of view, but that's neither here nor there. They're doing their own thing, and I think they've really got a good grasp on it. The only thing I want for this record is just a little bit more variety in the way that they present some of these songs, make them more of events rather than it's another notch in the project rather than a song that's meant to last. And that I didn't feel that on every song here, but most of them are pretty solid. So check that out yourself. It released on October 25th. You can listen to it now and read my review for more in-depth thoughts on the whole thing.